20-year-old San Diego State student was murdered by an on-duty CHP officer in the North County.
Find the defendant, Craig Allen Pyre, guilty of the crime of murder in the first degree.
And what is your conviction?
I was convicted of killing 2 in Fort Pierce.
Corruption within law enforcement is an issue that undermines the integrity of our justice system. This video will delve into the stories of 10 police officers whose unlawful actions were so severe that they led to capital punishment sentences. We'll explore the circumstances, charges, and the overall impact their actions had on the perception of police integrity in the United States. Number 1. Antoinette Frank, New Orleans Police Department. Antoinette Frank was a New Orleans police officer whose name became synonymous with corruption and egregious violation of the law. Frank's story started as a promising officer, but her career took a dark turn that ended in her being sentenced to death for her crimes. Born on April 30th, 1971, Frank joined the New Orleans Police Department, NOPD, in 1993. However, a series of misconducts, including theft, quickly tarnished her reputation. The most infamous case involved her in a robbery and triple murder at a Vietnamese restaurant, Kim An, which she frequently patrolled. On March 4, 1995, Frank and Rogers Lacaze, a drug dealer, entered Kim An after closing hours. In a chilling turn of events, the duo robbed the restaurant and shot 3 people, including fellow officer Ronald Williams II. The motive behind the gruesome act was purportedly to eliminate any witnesses to their heinous crime. NOPD quickly identified Frank as a suspect due to her unexplained absence during the time of the murder. Eyewitnesses at the scene identified her, and a later search of her home revealed damning evidence that tied her directly to the crime. Frank was tried and found guilty of first-degree murder. Her accomplice Lacaze was also convicted. The trial cast a dark shadow over the NOPD, highlighting severe corruption within its ranks. Frank's case was so extreme that she was sentenced to death, a rare punishment for an officer of the law. Her sentencing brought national attention to the NOPD, igniting a series of reforms to tackle corruption within the department. However, Frank's story remains a grim reminder of the potential for individuals tasked with upholding the law to become its most notorious violators. Frank remains on Louisiana's death row, having exhausted her appeals. Her case emphasizes the importance of police oversight and strict anti-corruption measures. It serves as a critical lesson for all law enforcement agencies. That trust, once broken, is challenging to restore. Number 2. Manuel Pardo, Florida Highway Patrol. Manuel Pardo's case stands as an unsettling reminder of how far a person can stray from their oath to protect and serve. A former officer of the Florida Highway Patrol and a Navy veteran, Pardo eventually devolved into a notorious serial killer, an antithesis of the law he once upheld. Born on July 2, 1956 in New York City, Pardo later moved to Florida where he served as a state trooper. His stint with the Florida Highway Patrol was marred by a questionable ethics record and ended in disgrace when he was fired for giving false testimony in a drug case. This marked a sinister turning point in Pardo's life, and he subsequently embarked on a murderous rampage that shook Florida in the mid-1980s. Between January and November 1986, Pardo was responsible for a chilling series of murders across the Miami-Dade County region. The victims, numbering 9 in total, were purportedly involved in drug-related activities. Pardo viewed himself as a vigilante, ridding the world of vermin, as he disturbingly referred to his victims. However, his methods were ruthless and far removed from any form of justice. His reign of terror came to an end when his ex-girlfriend tipped off the police about his gruesome activities. Law enforcement agents discovered a death diary during a search of his home, which included details of his victims and the crimes he had committed. The evidence was incontrovertible, leading to Pardo's arrest. The trial, which took place in 1988, made headlines across the nation. The self-proclaimed vigilante showed no remorse during the proceedings, even going as far as to request the death penalty for his crimes. Pardo's defense was that his victims were all criminals who had evaded justice, a claim that failed to hold water in court. The jury found him guilty of multiple counts of first-degree murder, among other charges. Given the severity of his crimes and his seeming lack of remorse, Pardo was sentenced to death. Pardo's case sent shockwaves through the Florida Highway Patrol and the broader law enforcement community. His downfall from a sworn officer to a serial killer challenged the public's trust in those tasked to protect them. It led to a renewed emphasis on ethics and conduct within law enforcement agencies, especially within the Florida Highway Patrol. Pardo spent more than 2 decades on Florida's death row, consistently asserting that he was in the right throughout his incarceration. His death by lethal injection in 2012 marked the end of one of Florida's most chilling criminal cases. However, his legacy serves as a sobering reminder that corruption and misuse of power can manifest in the most gruesome ways, even within the ranks of law enforcement. Number 3. Craig Pyer, California Highway Patrol. The case of Craig Pyer is a tragic example of a law enforcement officer whose corruption ended in a murder that shook the community's faith in the California Highway Patrol, CHP. Once a respected officer, Pyer's fall from grace is a stark reminder of the potential for abuse of power in law enforcement. Craig Pyer joined the California Highway Patrol in 1973. Over the course of his 13-year career, he was generally seen as a hard-working, dedicated officer. However, he had developed a reputation for overly aggressive enforcement of traffic violations, often targeting young female drivers. The turning point in Pyer's career and life came on the night of December 27, 1986. Kara Knott, a 20-year-old student at San Diego State University, was found dead under an abandoned highway bridge, having fallen or been thrown off. The crime shocked the San Diego community and initiated an intensive investigation. Evidence quickly led detectives to Pyer. Knott had been pulled over by Pyer shortly before her death, as evidenced by a traffic citation he issued. Unusual plant fibers were found on Knott's clothing that matched those on Pyer's uniform and patrol car. The same fibers were found at the crime scene. Furthermore, witnesses recalled seeing a CHP patrol car near the bridge around the time of the murder. The trial attracted national attention, casting a harsh spotlight on the CHP. Pyer pleaded not guilty, insisting he was innocent despite the mounting evidence against him. His defense attempted to discredit the evidence and suggested that the real killer was still at large, but the prosecution's case was compelling. In 1988, Pyer was convicted of first-degree murder, marking the first time a California Highway Patrol officer was convicted of murder while on duty. The shocking case led to a complete review of hiring practices within the CHP and sparked nationwide discussions on police misconduct. Pyer's case, however, did not end with his conviction. After 2 unsuccessful appeals, his sentence was changed to life imprisonment with the possibility of parole. His case sparked public outrage and made headlines, further damaging the already tarnished image of the CHP. Despite his sentencing, Pyer continued to maintain his innocence. He insisted that the case against him was based on circumstantial evidence and that he was a victim of a flawed system. His appeals and public pronouncements served only to keep the case in the public eye, a constant reminder of the horrific crime and the corruption within the CHP. The case had a profound impact on the CHP and law enforcement agencies across the country. The shocking revelation that a trusted officer could commit such a heinous crime led to significant changes in recruitment, training, and oversight within the CHP. It also emphasized the importance of transparency and accountability in maintaining public trust. Number 4. Drew Peterson, Bolingbrook Police Department, Illinois. The case of Drew Peterson serves as a cautionary tale about the potential for manipulation and abuse of power within law enforcement. A decorated officer with the Bolingbrook Police Department in Illinois, Peterson's downfall was marked by a tangled web of deceit, abuse, and murder that captured national attention. Peterson's law enforcement career spanned 3 decades, starting in the 1970s. He was viewed as a committed officer, receiving several awards for his service. However, his personal life was fraught with trouble. Peterson was married 4 times, with each relationship marked by allegations of controlling behavior and domestic abuse. The public began to question Peterson's integrity in 2007 when his 4th wife, Stacey Ann Kales Peterson, disappeared. His 3rd wife, Kathleen Savio, had been found dead in a bathtub in 2004, her death ruled an accident. However, Stacey's disappearance cast a suspicious light on Kathleen's death, leading to its reinvestigation. Examination of new evidence and re-autopsy of Savio's body led to a revised ruling: homicide. In 2009, Peterson was arrested and charged with the murder of Kathleen Savio. Stacy Peterson remains missing, and while Drew Peterson remains a prime suspect, he has not been charged due to lack of evidence. The trial gripped the nation, putting a spotlight on the issue of domestic abuse and the potential for police officers to manipulate the system. Peterson's defense maintained his innocence, arguing that the new findings were a result of a biased investigation. However, the prosecution presented a compelling case, including testimonies from Savio's relatives and friends, and Peterson was convicted of first-degree murder in 2012. Peterson's conviction marked a historic moment in Illinois law enforcement, as it was the first successful prosecution in the state without the victim's body, murder weapon, or eyewitnesses. This was seen as a triumph for victims of domestic violence, particularly those involved with law enforcement officers. In an unusual twist, while serving his sentence, Peterson was charged with solicitation of murder after attempting to hire a hitman to kill Will County State's Attorney James Glasgow, the prosecutor in his trial. He was found guilty and received an additional 40 years to his prison sentence, effectively ensuring he would spend the rest of his life behind bars. Peterson's case had significant impacts on both the Bolingbrook Police Department and law enforcement agencies across the nation. It led to increased scrutiny of domestic violence allegations involving police officers and emphasized the importance of thorough investigations regardless of the accused's profession. Number 5. Louis Ippolito and Stephen Caracappa, New York Police Department. Louis Ippolito and Stephen Caracappa were decorated detectives in the New York Police Department, NYPD. Their illustrious careers, however, were a facade for a sinister underworld involvement that would ultimately lead to their conviction for racketeering, extortion, and multiple murders. Ippolito and Caracappa served in the NYPD for several years, earning commendations for their service. Their partnership began in the late 1970s, when they were both assigned to the Brooklyn-based 62nd Precinct. Unbeknownst to their peers, they were living a double life, moonlighting as hitmen for the Lucchese crime family. Their dual lives remained hidden for years, their involvement in organized crime masked by their status as decorated detectives. They used their privileged access to confidential information to facilitate their criminal activities, betraying the trust placed in them as law enforcement officers. Their covert activities came to light in 2005 when they were arrested on charges of racketeering, kidnapping, and 8 counts of murder. Ippolito and Caracappa were alleged to have provided confidential police information to the Lucchese family, carried out hits on behalf of the family, and directly participated in murders. The case against them was extensive, including witness testimonies, financial records tracing large payments from organized crime figures, and detailed accounts of their involvement in murders. The two detectives stood trial in 2006 in a case that shook the NYPD and the city of New York. In a shocking turn of events, Ippolito and Caracappa were found guilty on all counts. Their sentencing marked a grim day in the history of the NYPD, tarnishing its reputation and prompting an overhaul of its internal review processes. Both detectives were sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole, marking a fall from grace that exposed the sinister potential of corruption within the police force. They remained unrepentant, maintaining their innocence despite the overwhelming evidence against them. The Ippolito and Caracappa case stands as one of the most notorious instances of police corruption in American history. Their convictions caused a major scandal within the NYPD, leading to rigorous reviews of police practices, hiring, and internal oversight. The trial also spurred changes in the way police departments across the country handle potential conflicts of interest and corruption within their ranks. Their story serves as a chilling reminder of the potential for individuals within law enforcement to abuse their positions of power. It underscores the vital importance of rigorous oversight, ethics training, and transparency within police forces to maintain public trust. Number 6. Gerald Schaffer, Martin County Sheriff's Office, Florida. Gerard Schaffer's name is synonymous with one of the most chilling tales of corruption within law enforcement. Schaffer, a deputy in the Martin County Sheriff's Office in Florida, lived a double life as a serial killer, betraying the public's trust and tainting the reputation of his department. Schaffer joined the Martin County Sheriff's Office in the early 1970s. By all accounts, he appeared to be a dedicated officer. But behind this facade, Schaffer was engaging in unspeakable acts of violence. His victims were young women whom he would often abduct while on duty, taking advantage of his authority to manipulate and control his unsuspecting targets. His reign of terror came to an end in 1973 when two teenage girls, bound and gagged, were found by a group of tourists in a secluded woodland area. The girls claimed that their attacker was a police officer, sparking an internal investigation that would lead to Schaffer. Evidence soon mounted against Schaffer, including similarities between his modus operandi and unsolved cases in the area. He was fired from the sheriff's office and arrested on kidnapping charges. Further investigation linked Schaffer to the murders of two women, Susan Place and Georgia Jessup, whose bodies had been found months earlier. During his trial in 1973, Schaffer was convicted of the murders of Place and Jessup and sentenced to life in prison. However, this was far from the end of his story. Over the years, Schaffer was linked to several other murders and suspected of many more. He never admitted to these crimes, maintaining his innocence even as the evidence mounted against him. Schaffer's case had profound impacts on both the Martin County Sheriff's Office and law enforcement agencies nationwide. It underscored the need for comprehensive background checks and psychological profiling during the hiring process, measures that might have identified Schaffer's potential for violence. Furthermore, it highlighted the importance of vigilant internal investigations to ensure that officers abusing their power are held accountable. Beyond these operational implications, the Schaffer case serves as a disturbing reminder of the potential for individuals in positions of power, particularly law enforcement, to commit horrific acts of violence. His ability to evade suspicion by virtue of his role as a police officer underlines the necessity of critical oversight and accountability within the police force. Number 7. Joe D. White, Greenville Police Department, Mississippi. The case of Joe D. White serves as a distressing instance of law enforcement corruption, marked by exploitation of authority and flagrant violations of the law. A police officer with the Greenville Police Department in Mississippi, White's corrupt actions culminated in a serious crime that shocked the local community and the nation at large. White joined the Greenville Police Department in the late 1970s, starting a career that initially appeared promising. However, over time, troubling reports emerged about his professional conduct. These allegations included abuse of power, excessive use of force, and a seeming disregard for the law he was sworn to uphold. In 1982, his dark path took an even more sinister turn when he was implicated in the murder of Linnell Blevins. White, along with two other men, kidnapped Blevins, who was later found dead, her body showing signs of a brutal assault. The shocking crime initiated an intensive investigation that brought White's professional misconduct into the spotlight. Following a highly publicized trial, White was convicted of kidnapping and murder in 1983. The case represented a flagrant betrayal of the law by an officer sworn to protect and serve, and his conviction sent shockwaves through law enforcement agencies in Mississippi and beyond. White was sentenced to death, marking the end of a dark chapter in the history of the Greenville Police Department. His actions and subsequent conviction led to an immediate review of the department's hiring practices and internal oversight mechanisms. The case highlighted the need for rigorous background checks, ongoing professional evaluations, and an effective system for addressing complaints about police misconduct. White's case had a far-reaching impact on the police department and the community. It prompted the implementation of improved hiring practices and stricter internal oversight. The department became more proactive in investigating allegations of police misconduct and made efforts to improve community relations. Yet, the case also served as a chilling reminder of the potential for corruption within law enforcement. It underscored the need for constant vigilance, thorough checks and balances, and ongoing training to prevent the abuse of power. Despite the significant steps taken by the Greenville Police Department in the wake of White's conviction, his story remains a grim reminder of the potential for corruption within the ranks of law enforcement. It underscores the critical importance of maintaining the highest ethical standards in policing to preserve public trust and uphold the integrity of law enforcement. The case of Joe D. White stands as a poignant illustration of the catastrophic consequences when those entrusted with upholding the law use their authority to violate it. It serves as a potent reminder of the importance of robust mechanisms of oversight, accountability, and justice in the law enforcement system. Number 8. Johannes Mazerle, Bay Area Rapid Transit Police, California. The case of Johannes Mazerle, a former officer with the Bay Area Rapid Transit, BART Police in California, ignited national debate about police brutality, racial profiling, and the use of force in law enforcement. Mazerle's actions during a routine arrest resulted in the death of Oscar Grant, a young African-American man, and sparked outrage in communities across the country. On New Year's Day 2009, BART police officers responded to reports of a fight on a train. Among the individuals detained was Oscar Grant. While trying to subdue Grant, Mazerle pulled out his firearm and shot him in the back. The incident, captured on multiple cell phones by bystanders, quickly circulated on social media and led to public outcry. Mazerle claimed that he had intended to reach for his taser, not his gun, a defense that ignited debates about police training and the appropriate use of force. The video footage, however, showed Grant being cooperative and posed no immediate threat, leading many to question Mazerle's judgment and intent. The case went to trial in 2010, with Mazerle facing charges of second-degree murder. The trial was a high-profile event, fraught with tension due to the racial implications and the growing national concern over police violence. Despite the video evidence and public sentiment, Mazerle was convicted of involuntary manslaughter, a lesser charge, and sentenced to 2 years in prison. The verdict was met with protests, as many felt the punishment was too lenient given the gravity of the crime. The case further fueled the national conversation about race, police violence, and criminal justice reform. Mazerle's actions and subsequent trial led to significant changes within the BART Police Department. Policies were revamped, training procedures enhanced, and the department adopted body-worn cameras in an effort to increase transparency and accountability. Yet, the department continued to face scrutiny and criticism, highlighting the deep-rooted issues of trust and systemic biases within law enforcement. The impact of Mazerle's case extended beyond the Bay Area. It contributed to a nationwide dialogue on police violence and racial discrimination within law enforcement. It also served as a catalyst for the movement advocating for police reform and accountability. Number 9. Charles Becker, New York Police Department. Charles Becker's name is indelibly etched in the annals of American law enforcement history, but for all the wrong reasons. As a lieutenant in the New York Police Department, NYPD, in the early 20th century, Becker's descent into corruption and crime culminated in a high-profile murder that led to his execution, marking the first time an NYPD officer was sentenced to death. Becker joined the NYPD in 1893, during a time when the department was rife with corruption. He soon found himself embroiled in the seedy underworld of New York, accepting bribes from gambling houses, brothels, and illegal saloons in exchange for police protection. His actions went largely unchecked until 1912, when he was implicated in the murder of Herman Rosenthal, a well-known gambler who threatened to expose police corruption after a dispute with Becker. Rosenthal was gunned down in front of a hotel, and 4 of Becker's associates were identified as the shooters. Becker was charged with ordering Rosenthal's murder. His trial captured public attention, revealing a tangled web of corruption that extended from the police department to City Hall. Despite Becker's protestations of innocence, he was found guilty of second-degree murder and sentenced to death. His conviction marked a pivotal moment in the history of the NYPD. It exposed the depth of corruption within the force and led to a massive overhaul of the department. Extensive reforms were implemented to root out corruption, including stricter hiring practices, better training, and increased oversight. Becker's case also highlighted the systemic nature of police corruption. It revealed that the problem wasn't limited to a few bad apples, but was an issue ingrained in the department's culture. This revelation prompted a broader discussion about the need for ethical policing and the importance of public trust in law enforcement. Despite these changes, Becker's story remains a grim chapter in the NYPD's history. It serves as a stark reminder of the potential for corruption within law enforcement and the dire consequences when police officers betray the public's trust. The Becker case brought about significant changes in policing, particularly in New York. It catalyzed reforms not just within the NYPD, but in police departments across the country. Becker's story underscored the need for rigorous oversight, transparency, and accountability in law enforcement to ensure the public's trust and safety. Number 10. David Warren, New Orleans Police Department. David Warren's case is a stark example of how devastatingly misuse of power and disregard for human life can shake an entire community. As an officer with the New Orleans Police Department, Warren's actions during the chaos of Hurricane Katrina resulted in a tragedy that drew national attention and sparked demands for police accountability. Warren joined the New Orleans Police Department in the early 2000s, bringing with him an intense commitment to law enforcement. Yet, the devastating impact of Hurricane Katrina in 2005 tested the limits of this commitment and, ultimately, led to a grave misuse of power. In the chaotic days following the hurricane, Warren was guarding a police substation when he encountered Henry Glover, an unarmed African-American man. Warren claimed that he perceived Glover as a threat and, without warning, fired a shot from his personal assault rifle, fatally wounding Glover. Glover's companions drove him to a nearby makeshift police station for help, but instead of receiving assistance, they were allegedly assaulted by other officers, and Glover's body was driven away in a car, which was later found burned out with his remains inside. Warren's actions and the subsequent alleged cover-up sparked public outrage. Amid increasing pressure, an investigation was launched into the New Orleans Police Department's actions during and after Hurricane Katrina. In 2010, Warren was charged with violating Glover's civil rights by shooting him without justification. His first trial concluded in a guilty verdict and a prison sentence of over 25 years. However, the case was complicated by subsequent appeals and retrials, which brought into question the appropriateness of Warren's original trial being linked with the later alleged cover-up by other officers. In a retrial in 2013, Warren was acquitted of the civil rights charges, with his defense arguing that he feared for his life in the tense post-hurricane environment. The verdict was controversial, as it seemed to hinge on the law's interpretation of reasonable fear in the use of deadly force by police. The case had far-reaching implications for the New Orleans Police Department and for national conversations about police use of force and accountability. It led to significant policy changes within the department, including new protocols for officer-involved shootings and the use of deadly force. David Warren's story is a reminder of the importance of ensuring police officers are equipped to handle high-stress situations without resorting to unnecessary violence. It underlines the need for rigorous training, sound judgment, and adherence to the law even in extraordinary circumstances. The broader implications of Warren's case also highlight the ongoing challenges in balancing the law enforcement mandate to maintain order and protect the public with respect for civil rights and the sanctity of human life. It underscores the importance of transparency, accountability, and the continuous pursuit of justice within the police force.